this is me. I work as a head of Dynamics 365 at a Scandinavian company called Knowit. As Simon said, I am a business applications MVP. I was the first ever with a focus on the application HR. I'm also a certified trainer, so I do some training. I do not code. I am totally no code. I laugh often and often too high, so I laugh all the time. I love the community. I am a geek. And of course, I am a massive and obsessive Liverpool fan.
And yeah, I am Matt Beard. I am a development team leader at a UK-based company called Data8 with a specialization in data cleansing and data enrichment. I've been there for nearly 10 years now as a full-stack C# developer. So when I first started, it was nothing to do with Power Platform, but as time has gone on, that's where it's turned into. So I am, like I say, Power Platform focused, and I am a published author with a caveat of within Power Automate. So one of the connectors within the platform itself was written by me and has gone through all the certification. So it's nice to see people using our stuff within a Microsoft platform. I am a dev, so I am pro code. I'm a self-confessed and unashamed geek, as you can probably tell by my backdrop. I'm not going to hide behind it. And unlike Malin, I'm quite lucky that I live relatively close to the city. So actually I get the opportunity to go to lots of games. So I couldn't resist by shoehorning at some point a nice picture of my seat within the Anfield Stadium. So
show off.
the one and only football reference I'll make, I promise, during this time.
So Matt, so you can see why Matt and I go well together. We both love the same club, so there's no argument there. We're both geeks, and we get quite along. The only thing is that I don't code and he does code, but that's a good thing.
We can work in harmony, as you'll find out within the next 50 minutes or so.
We'll see if you can work in harmony.
Well, yes.
Maybe we can. But we're going to walk through what has changed in this low-code platform the last years. Are there a need for developers? Where do you fit in? And what areas should developers focus on? But why am I here then? Matt also wonders that sometimes.
Never.
What is low code? Microsoft Publisher. So Matt and I discussed this because this is back in 91. None of us are really old. We're fairly young, both of us. Could we say that, Matt?
Just about, I think.
Yeah. But Publisher was released in 91, and it was an easy way to create your website. And you could just play around with it and try and make your own website without having to know any dev skill. And it's also very easy. So Matt and I talked about this commercial that goes on TV in the UK, where you can build your own website for £1, I think it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Just £1, no knowledge, make your own professional looking website. And it's always resonated with me from when I was a young kid. Yeah,
it's great. And it's kind of the way that WordPress or Wix or any of those platforms are, which is basically the only reason why I have a functioning website and a blog. I've set it up myself because I didn't need any code, because it just worked. It looks okay. But of course, if you're a developer, you can do more.
Even as a dev, we believe in when developers can use low-code, no-code solutions and things like WordPress themes, absolutely. I mean, I am unashamedly have a WordPress blog that is also a pre-done theme. So just because we can dev, we don't always do it.
And of course, just because you're a dev does not mean you are a front-end developer and know graphic design.
Absolutely.
And as I said, it just feels like magic. It feels like it works. And you can do stuff that just works without having to do anything that you don't understand. So what is code? The awesome Keith Watling UK business applications MVP, he said very smartly once that everything that has to do with curly brackets is code. End of discussion. Does that mean that everything that doesn't have curly brackets isn't code? What is low code? Who many of you know this guy? It's Charles Lamanna, and he has changed his title, I think, since this, but this shows that Microsoft has a focus because he is, what is it, Senior Vice President, I think, of the low code application platform. So here you can see that Microsoft have someone that is quite high in their hierarchy with a focus on the low code platform. So they've got their own person in charge of this. And some of you or some of us have been writing code, low code, for years. If you go, some of you might know this is Excel and a function in Excel. And if you do write functions in Excel, in our book, that is low code. It doesn't have curly brackets, but it's still low code. This is Power Automate. It's not always drag and drop, but it's still assisted, so you can point and click instead of drag and drop. And it gives you the feedback for your incorrect code. So if something doesn't work, you get a feedback saying that something doesn't work. Sometimes Microsoft gives you good feedback and say, this doesn't work because of this. Most of the time you get, sorry, that didn't work because something happened. Pro code, well, anything I don't do. Basically, it is anything that doesn't have a no code, low code alternative, and just about anything that I can't do. So if it's C#, TypeScript, JavaScript, if it needs compiling, and if it's written in a language that I don't understand, not Spanish, then it is code. So I asked a couple of my friends, why is it better to be a developer now than it used to be? Or is it better? Why should you be a developer now in the Power Platform? And I think both Jim and Daryl said it very good, because they say basically now developers are free to focus on the tasks that are bigger, that are cooler to do, that requires more code and not just the snippet, do this, and this is a 1 hour. I've done it a million times before. How do you even, it's boring. So I think they said it quite well. Good guys, both of them, and have been in the business for quite a long time, so they know what they're talking about. Mm. But everything starts somewhere. So, Matt, you remember 10 years ago?
10 years ago, yeah.
Called Dynamics CRM?
Mm. Fresh out of university, babyface, no idea what troubles was I about to face for the next 10 years.
Yep. Some of us still call it CRM, though, to be honest. It will never not be called CRM in my book. But that was just it. When I started just about 10 years ago in the in Dynamics world, one of the often asked about things were, can we make this field be hidden if the owner is me? Or if this, then can you hide or show this field? And the developer would answer, yeah, that's 1 hour development work. Okay. So, but can we just make this field be required when the state is new? Yeah, another hour development work. Fine. When a lead is qualified, can you automatically email the account owner and something else? Yeah, that's 6 hour development work. Fine. So the dev would have spent 8 hours creating these three functions, the functional consultant, me, I would just have to spend maybe a minute asking them, and then of course waiting and definitely until the developer had time to do that. Yeah. And of course, for project managers, 10 years ago, they would ask developers, so what is happening to this project now? Where are we at? And the developers have said, no, I've had no time to spare with nothing, and nope, I have no idea. So what can we do today? The same questions can be solved. I can do it. I can now hide a field if the owner is me. And how long did it take me? About 5 minutes. The same thing is if a field is required when the status is new, same business process, 5 minutes. Super easy. So what about when a lead is updated? Can you email the account owner? This was the 8-hour thing. It's now a Power Automate that I can do in 15 minutes. And it takes 15 minutes because they have changed the names on absolutely everything. So I had to go and look for everything, and I didn't find my entities and I didn't find my fields. So it took me a while to change my brain around to actually understanding what I was doing.
We all still struggle. We all still struggle dropping CRM, so we're going to struggle dropping entities and fields. I'll tell you that.
Yes, it's still. I think it's about 5 or 6 years since they dropped CRM, and it's still CRM for a lot of us. So no code. I now spent 25 minutes doing the same thing that a developer did in 8 hours before. Developer time, 0 minutes. He didn't have to wait. He didn't have to get interrupted. He didn't have to do anything. Great. So can you let me know where our big project is now? We've made great progress so far. Yeah, sure. You've got everything under control now.
Oh, yeah.
I trust you, Matt.
Yeah. Well-time managed and never distracted.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. So this was how things were before. So if you were a developer, you basically had to do anything. And a functional consultant now can do most of the easy tasks. So both the show hide fields, the lock and unlock, the set required, and these were things that were always asked about. So can you show this field if we click this button? Ugh, it's a 2-hour job for a developer. Now the functional consultant can do it. So what's left for the developer? Do we still need them? It's the custom development work and everything else.
Sorry. Skipping too far. Getting click happy at this point.
Yeah. Next.
So where does that leave us? Where does that leave the platform? Where does that leave low coders, no coders, pro coders, and everyone in between? So we decided to split the platform down a bit into different areas. We can give examples of no coders, what they're doing, low coders, what they're doing, and then ultimately what's left over for the pro coders and where do the important things matter. So, I mean, let's start with Power Automate, which my button isn't working. Let's try again. There we go. So by design, it's a no-code, low-code platform. That's what it's sold as. It's what it's been since its inception, and it's designed to do the things that we've said. Take the time away from the developers and give the power to much more people, not necessarily everybody. May lean towards everybody with the way that they've done things like Dataverse for Teams, but it's designed to, like I say, reprioritize people's time and make the most from everybody. So a lot of things can just be double-clicked and it will just magically work. Whereas there is some things and the line slowly starts to blur as we work our way through all this sort of stuff. And there's things that people from a low-code and no-code background will have to start thinking about that they've never really thought about before. So things that I will take for granted, things like knowing what JSON is knowing how to use JSON, knowing how to build JSON, those sorts of things. So you can see here, this is just a couple of examples of two different flows within Power Automate. So the left-hand side one was literally drag and drop. I've done nothing custom, done nothing bespoke, and I think that entire flow itself takes about 6 clicks before it does what it needs to do, and it just magically works, as we all know, as the wonders of this platform. The one on the right-hand side is a little bit more complex because we start thinking about complex objects and stuff, and a developer will not think twice about designing some JSON and passing it through to its next platform. Whereas for a no-coder, a low-coder person, it's a learning curve that we take for granted. So what it does do is helps people understand more things behind the scenes, and blur the lines a bit so people can have a nicer conversation. Now means that I can have a conversation with Malin about and say, she knows what a JSON object is. Whereas before this platform existed, I would imagine that was a little bit more alien.
Couldn't care less.
Exactly.
To be honest.
But the problem is, we give this power to people, and as I'm sure people watching will know this, that some people, quite frankly, to use a Batman reference, just want to see the world burn. So this is a real example of something I've seen somebody do in the past, which was somebody decided to do a flow that triggered when a new tweet was posted with a very, very generic word. And every time it was, they added it into the database. Dataverse, not database. There we go. That's the first language slip of the session. I think I've done well 15 minutes in. And yeah, it just fills it, and you think, where's my capacity going? I've got to pay for this. This stuff's got to live somewhere. So ultimately, all that happens is you just set your machines on fire, and you don't really know what you're doing because you've give all this control to people, and you've not really trained them in how to do that. So where does that jump into a pro code side of it? So we know what low coders can do now. They can do anything within reason, but we need to be sensible. So pro coders can come in and take an entirely different approach. So people want to integrate with their systems. That's one of the few massive reasons I've seen people use Power Automate in the past. But not everything has an API. They might have maybe an internal one, or they might have a very specific way it works, but it might not play friendly with things like Power Automate custom connectors. So this is where a pro dev could come in and build a custom API that is sort of a filter through to make that stuff work. When you've built that stuff, you're then in control of giving that across to the low code and no code, who can then reuse that for their own stuff. So you're sort of working together, right? You're making their job easier in ways that they never even realized you could. So you're extending the existing no code, low code platform for them already. And the same thing stands with custom connectors, which need authentication. As a developer, if I read OAuth 2, I generally know what that means. I know where to click. I know what I need to do. But I know I need to do things like I need to go into Azure Active Directory. I need to get app IDs and all this sort of stuff. And I know what that means because OAuth 2 is an industry standard. Again, if Marlin went in and was trying to make a custom connector that needed OAuth 2 connection, I'm going to take a guess that you might need a little bit of assistance on that.
That might be the understatement of the year so far.
So just because they can doesn't mean they necessarily should and will. The DLP, the data loss prevention, damage control as well. Power Automate, like we say, can be dangerous, and people can do a lot of damage with it. If your security roles allow deletes for somebody, there's nothing stopping them writing a Power Automate that will open all their records and delete them all. There is nothing really stopping that. So if you don't trust your users, which I've seen people don't trust their users a lot, you can put fail safes in place. You can turn off and on. It used to be just connectors, I believe. After Ignite, you can now actually turn off and on different actions within these connectors. I think that was announced at Ignite, so that's even nicer that you can actually to even more of a granular level decide what people are doing.
So you can now actually shut off the Twitter connector so that that never happens again. And so you never get your database filled up with all of these Twitter messages. So you can do that with the DLP.
I trust people even less. I would turn off create a new record. That's how little I would trust them. But that's my cynical developer self?
Well, I learned sometimes that no system is your system is only foolproof until a bigger fool comes around.
Yeah.
And that I have seen the last 10 years. That is absolutely true.
I agree.
Yep.
And the final thing that's useful is things that the developers take for granted. They're the stuff that you learn if you go to university and you study coding, or you go online, you go to YouTube and you put, how do I become a coder? When you're starting your career, there is things that you absolutely take for granted. Like, I know what a loop is, I know what a try-catch is, and I know that relatively early on in my coding career. Whereas until you've been shown these things at Power Automate and you think in that way, because you've got to make yourself think that way, you just don't do it. What if errors? Oh, it just errors. There's nothing I can do about it. No, there's a thing called try catch that when it does error, you can now make it do this. And just those little things are useful. On top of that, and again, I'm talking about the platform itself here, is that API calls are monitored, they are logged, they are limited. You want more, you got to start paying for them more. All this stuff comes at a cost. So if you had a simple scenario where if I told somebody that, I have no doubt that most no-coders, low-coders that understand Power Automate could say, go and load in all the accounts and make an update to them all. So they would probably do a list of records, loop through them all and set them. That's, let's say there's 10,000 accounts in that. That's one for a load, and then 10,000 ones for updates. That's 10,000 records that I've made. Whereas as a developer, I've got this in my head that I want to try and minimize these calls. I want to make it more efficient. And do these extra sorts of things. So I've got to try and pass on any coding standards that I have learned over time and apply them in a low-code, no-code world. And that's just Power Automate. That's me not really touching code. That's the amount of places that I can help people with. Other than the custom APIs, the custom connectors, and the DLP stuff, that's still me using user interfaces, but it's me applying the extra things that I know to help other people out. So moving on to Power Apps, this is where we spend probably the bulk of the time now. Canvas apps is pretty much all no-code, low-code. I was thinking before that I know of one place that you can do it, which is horrible, which is, I think it's Scott Giroux did a video of how to run JavaScript in a Canvas app, so don't go near that. Generally, I don't think there is anywhere in Canvas apps you can run sort of pro code. I know there is a thing called PCF, which we'll move on to in there, but that's not currently at GA yet. So it's safe to assume that really Canvas apps is very much low code. Model-driven apps are sort of the other way. Model-driven apps can do a lot of the common things you want now in no-code, low-code, which we spoke about earlier, things like your business rules and making things recommended and show hide and that sort of stuff. That's all now can be done in a no-code, low-code world. But on top of that, on top of relatively minor user interface tweaks, it's very difficult to really get powerful things in there. The other benefit of no-code, low-code that people often forget about actually is that the XRM Toolbox is a fantastic tool. Malin and I were talking about it. We both use it extensively. It's one of the number one things I will tell people to go and learn and go and look at, because it is the lifesaver that has saved me so many times.
But I do think we use it completely differently, though.
Absolutely.
I use it for the things that are near code, but I still need to use it. But I don't want to do code, and I can still do a lot of things with our XRM Toolbox, even though I do not code. So always, 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 if you're using Dataverse or Dynamics 365, download XRM Toolbox, and it will save you time. I guarantee it.
It will. The thing that helps projects, helps things work, is when communication is good. And what I think XRM Toolbox itself is fantastic at doing is bridging that gap. And I sort of mentioned it earlier with the JSON about Power Automate. It lets us start speaking the same language. Marlin can now say to me, hey, I wrote a bit of XML that is a fetch XML that gets you some records. This is the criteria I want. Can you use it? I now know what that means. I understand what it means. And I could literally copy and paste her fetch XML and put it into my code if I was doing it that way.
And I'm super proud because I actually did something coding. Super happy.
Exactly. And having that additional dialogue is so beneficial for me as a developer. There's nothing I find more frustrating than a request that comes in that is the most vague request I've ever seen, because whatever happens, I am going to get it wrong. I am not going to understand that requirement as it should be. So bridging this gap is useful. And if you've not seen XRM Toolbox, there's a couple of screenshots here. This is an example of a couple of the tools that are on there. That's even more. You can download them. So it's 218 tools altogether at this point. And there is some absolutely that only a dev will go near. There is some in there that only a low-code dev, I guess, would go near. And there's ones in the middle of that. So this is an example when we're talking about. This is the Fetch XML builder. In fact, this is not. This is the bulk record updater, which is the ability to go in and change, a bit similar to we talking about Power Automate. Go and change 10,000 records to have this field set to this. But what this tool does is cleverly does it in things like in batches. So this is already thinking about the dev side of it, of minimizing your API calls. So Jonas, in this case, who all thoughts with him at the minute, and we're all excited for Jonas and seeing where he goes, has built this, and he's thought about these problems that other people already face. He's got that dev head on, and he's thought about that. So what we can do is we can now go, well, here you go, missed low code. Use this instead, because this will help you understand what it is, and hopefully you could apply those fundamental things that you thought about earlier.
And it helps me in my
Yes, exactly. This is another one. So this is just one this is actually one I built. So the XRM Toolbox is worth adding at this point is that it's free. It's open to the community. Anybody can make anything, and they can push it to the greater world for anybody to download and use. So this is one that I built, for example. I built it for an internal reason, and actually it was that good that I thought I'll release it out because other people will have the same usage for it. And it lets you do things like checks that your data is valid within the record it's in. So do your phone numbers look like phone numbers, and are your option sets, there's the second one, are your choices the right option set value or choice or whatever they're going to call it nowadays. We know what we're going to do. And other things like, are your max mins within range? That's the sort of thing you can do, but you can then apply that to your system without, again, talking to a dev. And then Ribbon Workbench. Ribbon Workbench is low code, no code. Again, this is made by Scott. This lets you add buttons on and stuff like that. Scott's done such a good job of this, and I think everybody that uses XRM Toolbox or has heard of it has probably also heard of Ribbon Workbench at some point or another, which lets you drag and drop ribbon buttons on and make changes to them. And already it's a low code, no code solution. You can put code in it. Don't get me wrong. You can make it more complex by doing that, but you don't need to do that. And in time, this will get easier, and we'll sort of move on to this bit later on. But right now, as a low coder, you could still go and do that.
I can do that, and I can update everything.
Exactly. These are all free codes, but free tools. So if you ever use any tools for anyone at all, and if they've got donate buttons on them, please always consider doing it, just because lots of people put lots of their time into these things. So that was sort of a low code, no code area, and that was the things they can do. Now, what about code? Where does code run in this sort of stuff? Now, this is where I can talk for a long time when I'll need to get over it quickly because I don't have all day to talk to you, which is...
I will stop you here if you go on too long, because I have no idea.
That's fine. If I start rambling about nonsensical things, feel free to interrupt. I can run code from pretty much anything the system can do, and I can run it at any point during its execution pipeline. What does that mean? So I can, if someone does an update, I can intercept it. I can check that update is a valid update to be done. And if not, I can revert it, or I can make extra manipulation in the middle of it. And it just goes through as if it was part of that update. And this is sort of what this thing called the execution pipeline is. So there's multiple stages that the code runs through, which behind the scenes, they're stage 10, 20, 30, 40. I'm not quite sure why they're 10, 20, 30, 40. Someone will have something around there somewhere. And you've got pre-val, pre-op, and post-op, 10, 20, 40. So they're just different areas. The ultimate thing we care about, right, is that this is all done transactionally. What that means is if this fails at any point, the entire thing fails. So if you want to do an update on a record and you were doing something else at the same time, and the something else failed, the update wouldn't go through, because then you wouldn't then have a mismatch of whatever your requirement was. This is where, because Power Automate is only async, Power Automate can only run after something, you can potentially hit a problem with this. So if you ever want to live in a synchronous world where things just happen and are guaranteed to happen, sadly, you're going to need a coder. You're going to need a dev for that. Maybe we'll get to the point where the workflow engine that exists within model-driven apps is gone and Power Automate is synchronous. I am going to hold my reservations on that and say it's probably not still going to go for a long time. I know they will try. They will try. I still know people that go to Force Classic on their user interface. So some people simply don't like change. So whilst the workflow engine is still there, people are going to use it, and they need synchronous code. Now, the one thing you'll notice there, by the way, is that there's 10, 20, 40. So where's 30? Now, what 30 is the area that you can't manipulate. You can manipulate before and after. 30 is the actual original request. So create, update, delete, or whatever. That is the request that the server is going to do. So what's this 30 thing and what we're talking about? I'll get onto that in a minute. Because there is so many things you can do with this, and people have such complex systems based on so many entities, that if you were to make a Power Automate flow through all this stuff and you've managed to miraculously have a system where doing it all async works for you, then I firstly tip my hat off to you, because my mind doesn't think in an asynchronous way unless I'm writing JavaScript, but that's more a comment for devs that they'll hopefully appreciate my pain. With sync, how do you manage it? Imagine how many flows you're going to have. So this is a screenshot. This is the plugin registration tool. This is where I attach onto different things. So this is just one. So DataRate I work for as an ISV. This is an example of how much just one of our tools hooks into somebody else's system. Each one of those steps is a new step. So it could be on a create or an update or a merge or whatever. I mean, I already can't fit them on the page. If each one of these was to be a Power Automate within Power Automate, there's so much. It's going to be crazy. So this is why the dev side of it to handle this side of stuff, I think, is still going to be required, and again, isn't going to go anywhere. Now we talked about this stage 30. What is this stage 30? What am I going on about? There is times when you can make a custom action. Now, when I first started with custom actions and custom APIs, which they sort of later become, which I'll go on to, I didn't get them. And it took me a long time to understand what they are, what's their benefit. And even then I was like, what's going on? And I remember, I think I went to a user group over in Tampa in 2017, maybe. And it was only during a conversation and with a guy called Matt Barber, who, if anybody knows within Microsoft, he's one of the on the product team, I think, wherever he is nowadays. And he explained to me, this is the point of them. And it sort of clicked. And actually what I now find is that because the world of behind Power Platform has evolved to things like PCF, that custom actions are more powerful than they've ever been before, but they're underused. They're very underrated, I think. And what they've done is they've now moved over to custom APIs. So what is it? A custom action is, you can basically make a custom thing that runs, and it basically triggers some code to do something at any point. Because you might want to run some code when something happens that isn't an existing thing. So it's not create, I've not updated a record, I've not done anything, but I've got a button on my phone that I press that I want to go and do something. So you can have a custom action there, which is a custom usage. Now, the place I use the most, because I've spent a long time writing JavaScript recently, is JavaScript. You can get lost in asynchronous hell because everything is a promise and returns these things. And to get the data back, it can be crazy. So what I did instead was I wrote this custom action that did all my stuff in nice, pretty C# code that I can write, that I've got IntelliSense for, that I'm, quite frankly, better at writing than JavaScript. And it then returns it to the JavaScript. So C# has done all the hard work, and it's just give me a JSON object of all the hard work and give it to JavaScript, and JavaScript's just got the easy job of just processing through it. So it sounds complex, and for any low coders in here, I apologize. But this is where they are absolutely the most powerful in my eyes, is the custom actions. But they can help blur the lines as well, because what can happen is that you can call these custom actions or custom APIs in Power Automate. So if you've got a step of 5 things that needs to happen, I don't know, reassign to this and update this record and do this all in one go, you could make a custom action that runs that code. Then your low coder, no coder could just call the custom action in their Power Automate, and they don't have to worry about the inner workings of it. And then as time goes on, I can make a change my side, and that flow still continues to work with the bug fixes inside it. So there's all sorts of blur in the lines of where these can be beneficial.
And it was also one of the first things you saw when I did the Power Automate, the screenshot of when a lead is qualified. You said, "Oh, but you could use a custom action. I can," and then you started going on, and we can take that another day, not while we're building.
Yes,
but I'll teach you.
Exactly. Yeah, qualify lead is a great example of it's an action, right? It's because what it does is behind the scenes is if you quantify what qualify lead does, it sets the status of a lead to be qualified. It then goes to make a new contact with all these fields. It then makes an account with all these fields. It updates the lead with these things. They're all steps that you could, in theory, do in Power Automate. But what the product team behind CE have done is they've made that into a custom action. You call one thing and it works. So this is a good example. I can do the same thing, but custom. So that's where it's a trigger, right? So a custom action is a weird thing to start, because to make a custom action, you make it in the old workflow engine, but it's not really anything to do with the workflow engine. You can use the workflow elements on it if you want to, but they're sort of irrelevant. And I think I was talking about this with Mark Carrington earlier, who I work with. I think the reason that it exists in the workflow engine is that, quite frankly, when it existed, Microsoft had nowhere else to put it. So it just sort of went there. And that's pure speculation on my behalf. Don't take that as gospel. Don't go and shout at me if I'm wrong. But I suspect the reason it goes there is that it just doesn't fit anywhere else. But with this move to the Maker portal and that sort of stuff, custom APIs came out, which are very, very, very similar. They do randomly redirect to the legacy interface when you make a new one. I don't know why. And they are still in preview. So right now, be aware if you're going to use any of these things, think about GA in preview and all those sorts of stuff. And they can do these things. So custom action has one extra benefit. Custom APIs has one extra benefit, which you can use that against the collection of entities rather than just one, which, again, is going to start helping things like API requests in mass. So this is 2 examples. This is me making a custom action in both areas. So the left-hand side is the old interface as such. You can see there it looks very much like a workflow. At the bottom, I can add steps and I can do these things to it. But the recommended approach, I believe, or certainly was when I was speaking to them at Microsoft, is you don't really do anything in there. This is solely a trigger to make your code run. And on the right-hand side, as you can see, it's redirected to the old interface, but I've given it a name and I've done some stuff. I'm not going to dig into it too much. And I'm going to run this code. I'm going to take an input and a multiplier, and I'm going to output the result to those 2 things. It's a fairly nonsensical action bit of code, but I'm going to use that code because this is the sort of thing in a more advanced world that a low-code dev couldn't do. All right, they could probably do multiplication, but you can see the bigger picture, and I think you'll get what I mean. So now I've got this bit of code. What I want to tell the system to do is, when someone calls the action, run that code. Give me the output. That's ultimately all I need to do. So I'm in the plugin registration tool, which I showed earlier, and you can see there on the message of custom action example, I'm now running. In fact, I've got a mouse. I can show you this. I don't know if you can see the mouse. You can see here that on the custom action example, I am going to run the bit of code that exists in here. So that's the same sort of thing. And I'm going to run it synchronously post-operation. So I'm going to run my command. It's not actually going to do anything in state. So 10, 20, 30, as we were talking before. Run the action, doesn't do anything, then goes and does all the magic, and then because it's synchronous, will give me the response back. And in the custom APIs, which is the new version, it's basically the same thing, right? The unique name is there, and here I'm saying what I'm running, and down here I'm saying this what I'm running. So it's very, very similar, just in a new user interface, or an old new unit, whatever.
It's not easy with the old and the new. When
Yeah.
it looks like the old and the old looks newer than
Look, I still get confused if it's the unified interface, the user interface, or whatever UI stands for. I still don't know. I'm glad that debate's not going to happen anymore.
Agreed.
So this is now a Power Automate flow, and what this is doing is doing the same thing twice. This is just to prove that both of those things are the same. I can call this action, I can put the inputs in, and I get an output. So when I run them, 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 3, and you can see how that code has now been run from multiple different ways. And what I can now do is this flow exists all the time. If I went in and changed it to be plus instead of multiplication and put that code onto the system, the Power Automates will just automatically change their behavior without the low coder doing anything at all. So there really is bridging this gap of making things join. And
now give it to me so I can actually use it in my flows and take part of that magic.
Absolutely. PCF, I've spoken about this already a few times. If you didn't know what it was, I'll go into it now. PCF is the Power Apps component framework. Started private preview, so the public, well, the private public really got a view of it sort of mid-2019. It went GA mid-2020. This is in model-driven apps. Canvas apps is still in public preview. It's been in public preview for well over a year now, so I don't know where that is right now. So who knows? But this is where the fine line of where I said earlier there is no pro code within Canvas apps. It's probably going to change at that point, and that's where the fine line will blur even more. And a PCF is basically a reusable component built solely in code with unlimited potential. Back in the days with web resources only, they had their limitations. There was things you couldn't do. There was things you weren't allowed to do. Just because you could do them doesn't mean they were officially supported by Microsoft. There's all sorts of things that you've got to try and think about. Whereas PCFs are a lot more supported because the way they're done behind the scenes is clever. They link to the forms differently. They're independent. There's all sorts of cleverness behind the scenes that if you really dig into it, is just absolutely genius. One of the most important things I think for them is that they share their contacts with the form they're on. So web resources sort of do that, but you've got to be clever. So if you're making a field look pretty through an old school web resource, and then the field is also somewhere else on your system, you make the change, you've got to sort of do refreshes and you've got to do horrible JavaScript to make it work. Whereas PCF just works. So the simplest example of a PCF, and this is one of the out-of-the-box ones that I think they've now unsupported. I don't know if they've brought a new version of it out. Is the toggle. So this is the same field on the same form twice. If I change the top one from allow to do not allow, the second one automatically refreshes itself and changes. Like, I don't need to refresh the page; it just works. And vice versa, if I do it from the bottom, the top one changes. So they're interacting with the form all the time. So it just provides a user experience that people take for granted, to be honest. Because if the user interface doesn't, if the user experience isn't what somebody expects, then the first person that gets it in the neck is the dev, because they say it doesn't work properly. Why doesn't that button do this and refresh this page and whatever? And that's where the feedback falls onto. So if you can use tech that uses that, then great. What that also means is that if you're clever in the way that you configure a PCF, because they are configurable, you hand them over to the low coder and you say, right, as well as having a text box, as well as having a number field on your form, you've now got this bit of code that you can reuse anywhere you want. And they can then start making pretty user interfaces as well, based on the code that you've got.
Now I look brilliant because of this. Love it. Who doesn't love it? It's awesome.
Exactly. And because of the sheer power of them, there's things like the Fluent UI now, which used to be Office Fabric, which is styling, right? We touched on it earlier. Front-end dev is not for me. I can make things if someone gives it to me, give me a piece of paper and a paintbrush, and it will look like a 3-year-old's done it. So yes, the key thing is you can reuse things that people already done. Now, people used to use Bootstrap because that was generally what was available and was good. Having this available to you now, Bootstrap always felt like you could tell it was a web resource, and I think if a user is using that, it just feels disjointed. It's nice to feel like It's naturally in there. I don't like this disjointed approach of styling, whereas Fluent UI will let you do that very, very quickly and makes it feel natural. That's the sort of code that goes into BCF. This is one that I was actually working on recently, which is just lots and lots and lots and lots of code. So they're very code heavy, but they're worth it. However, things already exist. So don't worry if you've got a nice idea. People already might have done it. So there is a great thing called PCF Gallery, which has all sorts of things on it. Chances are, if it's a common ask, I'd be surprised if it's not already on PCF Gallery. An example of that, and one we've seen quite a lot, and funny enough, Marlin put in the presentation without knowing I already use it, was one by a guy called Andrew Botenko, which is dependent option sets, which is a request we see a lot now, right? Which is option set 1 changes, they want option set 2 to be a subset of those. That's done as a PCF, so you can see there that on the right-hand side now, actually, that's actually a 3-tier thing now. So changing that one changes that one changes that one. So if I was to change this top one, the bottom 2 drop-down boxes would change and just help improve data integrity, which ultimately I think is the main point of most systems. You want good quality data in your system. If you've got a terrible system, then you're limiting whatever it is that your business is doing. Yeah.
And a massive shout out to Andrew Botenko, because the way he's done it, because this is a screenshot from the GitHub, where he put it, and he has put down step by step, as easy as no coders can easily take this from 1 to 10 and put it in their own system. I can take this, I can do this. He's written down exactly how to do it. So he's given me the tools to take his tool that he's built and have it in my system. And it just works great. And he also told me 3 hours ago that he has also created something called the AB Control Toolkit, which is, he hasn't announced it. It's silently released as a newer version, and he's working on the documentation. But that toolkit also includes the dependent.
Nice.
Yes, so more is coming, and more is coming every day. But there are some superstars that are creating some amazing stuff, and Andrew and Matt is also one of them. So really good.
Right, I have lots of slides in 4 minutes, so I'm going to speed the hell up. Right, so next one is Procode would need to apply ALM techniques. If you are doing proper ALM techniques into stuff, so, handling stuff up UAT to dev to prod and those sorts of things and up and down, then I'm used to that. I'm used to putting things in source control. I'm used to handling those sorts of things. No devs are not. So I'd apply the knowledge from that into managing the change moving forward. So you can see here, there's an example of this is a release pipeline of updating plugins and doing magic stuff. This is the sort of stuff that a dev would be used to doing that other people wouldn't. So you would either do it for them or help them understand what this sort of stuff means. Chances are you probably do it for them. And because, like I said, we're giving people this power to do these things, you want to make sure you've got backups. You want to make sure you're doing this stuff properly, because people can break the systems. And then external tools. This is great. This is you can make toolbox tools internally to the point where actually, if a dev makes an external toolbox tool, you can actually set it to have an iPrivate plugin interface, which means Tanguy doesn't report on it in his stats, because I didn't realize until recently it does that. So there's all sorts of internal tools that are showing there. So yeah, anything that you do regularly inside is useful to do that. And finally, low-code support. So I've sort of touched on it earlier. Offering the things I take for granted to other people. So I know what lazy loading means. I know I know how to use variables. I know also like how to use delegation stuff. That's alien stuff to a lot of people. Whereas when they need it, they come asking, they then learn it, they can then reuse that knowledge. So one of the key things for a pro dev is low-code support. Which does lead us on to a new thing, which is Power FX, which is that people are going to want help. So I'll end on this slide. I think I'm going to speed on to that one just because I need to hurry up.
Accountants have been writing functions in Excel for years, and they are super insanely good at it. And that is basically what Power FX is. It's not a new code language. It's just the language that has always been there has now got a name.
Exactly, and PowerFX is going to go everywhere. It's open source, so devs can add to it. Devs can understand what it's doing behind the scenes. They can help people understand how to use it. I think, I don't know this for a fact, I think this is what is going to become into the ribbon in the next few years. I know Scott and Duro announced something around this area at a Scottish Summit, so go and check Scott's video on that sort of stuff. But I think PowerFX is coming and is going to stay, which is why I titled this slide after Scott and Sarah's Pro Code, Low Code Unite area. And to speed through it quick, because we might have questions, and I know there'll be other speakers waiting to talk, is there is certifications for both. There is the App Maker one, which I think is a more basic understanding of coding principles. There's bits of code, VBA, that sort of stuff. So that's a bit more low codey. And then there's the full-on dev, go and write code and do crazy things. So there's both levels of coding. So yeah, in summary, devs are going nowhere. We are needed. We are needed for support. We're needed for new stuff. Don't panic just because it says low code. Someone's got to write the low code.
Yep.
And yeah, ultimately, sorry for speeding through the last minute. This is what I get when I start talking about plugins. I totally run out of time. And with that, we're not going anywhere. And that's the most important part of this presentation to take away from that.
And I still need developers, because even though my job has gotten a lot easier and I can do a lot of stuff myself now, you still need to do all the cool stuff and all the complex stuff.